Good morning. Thank you for joining us here today. My name is Debbie Love. I'm the Director of Development Services for the City of North Miami. This is a project near and dear to my heart personally because we have a lot of complaints in our community about traffic and concerns about development, primarily focused around traffic. And one of the things you're going to hear from our consultant today is one of our solutions that we're proposing from the planning side is we have created a mobility action plan and a mobility fee. Jonathan is going to go through and give you some explanation, introduce himself, and talk about his findings and the fee schedule. As you're going to hear today, the mobility fee is replacing our road impact fee that we currently have, because that is limited to only building capacity, and we really have no roadway width to be able to widen our streets. So by using this type of method, and you'll hear more about it, we'll have a lot more flexibility to build everything from wider sidewalks to dealing with our traffic calming devices and making our streets safer and more pedestrian friendly is the goal. And with that, I'm going to let Jonathan Paul, who I've known for many years, I'm not going to give our ages away, but he's younger than me, but he's 20 plus years of experience in doing this throughout Florida. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan, and he's going to go through his findings and the action plan and the fee schedule.
Thank you very much, Debbie. Jonathan Paul, Principal of New Urban Concepts, going to present today the City of North Miami's Mobility Action Plan and proposed mobility fee. Essentially, the mobility plan is an opportunity to look at how do you evolve your transportation system from one focus primarily on moving cars to moving people and giving people choices. In this community, in Miami-Dade and Aventura and North Miami, you've essentially reached your maximum capacity that you can add to the roadway network. Maybe there's some opportunities to make some connectivity here and there, but in all likelihood on roads like Biscayne Boulevard, interstate system, 123rd, 125th, you're pretty much limited to what you have now. And there's really not an opportunity to build your way out of capacity. And even if there was, it hasn't been able to show that it's worked anywhere globally, whether it be Jakarta, Indonesia, whether it be Shanghai, China, Mexico City, global cities. None of them have been able to provide enough roadway capacity to build their way out of congestion. So you have to look at something different other than just moving people in cars. Otherwise, congestion will just continue to get worse and worse, regardless of how much new development you do have or don't have. And a lot of development that you do have here in the city of North Miami, if anything, it will help make TripLink shorter because it will bring people closer to where services are. A lot of what you experience now is cut-through traffic to avoid US 1, to avoid the interstate system, going out to the west, going up to Hollywood or Aventura. So it's not necessarily from new development in the city itself, but you suffer what many communities suffer in the Miami-Dade area and throughout Florida, is cut through traffic to go somewhere else. And so we're really focused on the mobility action plan is centered around, you have two planned rail stations in your community, one at 123rd/125th, another up at 151st Street, potentially within the next 5 years. And this would be service that would be frequent, not necessarily like Brightline service where it's once every hour and only has 5 stops. This would have multiple stops from downtown Miami all the way up to Aventura. Eventually, when Broward and Palm Beach County come to some type of agreement, go all the way up to Jupiter in Palm Beach County. So this really has the opportunity to provide people with viable options. To go north and south along these corridors, what's lacking is how do you get people from where we are today or from where their home is or businesses in North Miami to the rail stations. And that's really what the mobility plan is focused on, is how do you facilitate access to this future capacity? Because essentially rail is going to be the solution for how you're going to get around regionally in the community. And with all that, the plan and the projects themselves in the mobility plan form the basis for the mobility fee. So what's a mobility fee? It's an alternative to transportation concurrency. Within the city itself, it would be an alternative to the concurrency exception area policies. It's paid by new growth. It's not a tax. It's not an assessment on existing homeowners. It's for new growth and new development only. And it is a funding source to help pay for the projects identified in the mobility plan. So there are multiple steps that go into developing a plan and a fee. The city's already taken part of the first one and updated its comprehensive plan to reflect a more multimodal transportation system. The next three steps are what we're doing right now today: the mobility plan, the mobility fee, and then also an implementing ordinance that makes it all legal and effective. And from that, that's really the next big step, will be putting the mobility plan and fee into action. Your day-to-day implementation, development review, and how do you work with development to help them improve your transportation system. This isn't new to North Miami. This is something actually that when I was in Alachua County as a similar role to Debbie, the state of Florida had asked us to look at something different back in 2006, 2007. Out of that came the concept of mobility plans and mobility fees. County Commission at that time had no interest in widening roads. They wanted to get people around by some other means. And that's really started the impetus. City of Gainesville followed on shortly after, and then a number of other communities. Debbie and I back in 2014, 2015, did one for Dade City in Tampa area, Osceola County, and also more locally, the city of Miami Beach. And more these are being adopted throughout the state of Florida now. And the primary reason is most communities like North Miami found that they can't build their way out of capacity. They can't add enough roadways to satisfy the demand that's already on the roadway or the future demand, and they have to look at something else. So really the mobility fee has really been found to work in conjunction with the mobility plan as a funding source to help advance projects, whether they be on the state road, the county road system, or the city road system. And I'll say the vast majority of the communities that have adopted these, they've benefited from the mobility plan because it serves as a blueprint when new development comes in. They help to build part of your infrastructure. They help to extend it beyond their boundaries to the next logical street, to the next logical block. And then you work in conjunction with your partners in various funding opportunities. I'd say what we found in a lot of the communities we work in, upwards of half the mobility plan projects get funded by means other than the mobility fee. They get funded by public-private partnerships, by grants, by FDOT resurfacing a road or the county resurfacing a road, and the city bringing some money to the table saying, instead of a 5-foot sidewalk or a 4-foot bike lane, we want an 8-foot shared use path. We want decorative lighting. We want streetscape amenities in our community. And it really is forming the basis for a partnership. You'll never realize, some of you that are involved in the day-to-day development, when you have development projects, resurfacing, utility relocations, there are so many opportunities out there to actually improve your transportation system. But unless you've got a plan and a vision for that, a lot of the times they're missed opportunities. And so mobility fee will help fund sidewalks, bike lanes, intersection improvements, streetscape improvements, transit circulators to get to the future rail station. And this plan includes all of the above. There are two documents that we've prepared. One is sort of a user-friendly version of the mobility plan and mobility fee for the general public. We found that these have been very popular. It's designed for people to be able to quickly read, quickly see what's going on, and keep people's attention. So this is the executive summary. It's available on the city's website. It highlights what is a plan, what is a fee, what are the projects, and what is the actual dollar amount of the fee itself. So it's a relatively quick and easy read compared to the technical report that I'll get into a little bit later, which is far more detailed and is really prepared for legal purposes. And so this plan, beyond just getting to the future rail station, is really also tied to development, new development, redevelopment. That's most likely what you're going to see in North Miami. You don't have a lot of greenfield spaces, you don't have a lot of empty lots. Most of it's going to be redevelopment, and that's an opportunity to work with that development to help build your infrastructure plan. In addition, the mobility fee can be used as a tool to say, if you advance these improvements beyond your development limits, we can offer you credit for doing so. So you can now get sidewalks, bike lanes, other improvements as part of a development. They get a benefit because it improves the entire block in front of them, and the city benefits and the community benefits because you only have the project under construction once, and it gets done far quicker than what you would be able to do otherwise. And so that's one of the biggest things that we have found, and this goes all the way back to my original plan in Alachua County back in 2007, 2006. 75% of that plan has been funded or built by development. Now, we've just hit the 15-year milestone of that, but that was a vision 15 years ago, and it's come to fruition, and we've seen it over and over in Altamont Springs, in Sarasota, in Osceola, other communities I've done these in. The plan, if it's used as a tool, helps guide and make these improvements far quicker than the city ever could on its own. And so one of the big projects is what we're calling pedestrian priority streets. I'm not going to take credit for this because this is actually some term that was already defined in your transit-oriented development plan. And so essentially this mobility plan is integrating that concept in your TOD plan around the rail station, and it's expanding it citywide to your major county roads, your state roads, and major city roads. Essentially what it calls for is as development comes in, they replace 5-foot sidewalks or no sidewalks with a 10-foot wide sidewalk with a 5-foot buffer on the back of the roadway where you can put in streetscape, landscape, and lighting. And the benefit of the mobility fee now is, say you have the next parcel that isn't likely to develop. Well, if the right-of-way is available there, you have the benefit to say to the development, if you make this improvement all the way to the next street, we can offer you, instead of you paying your credit and your fee to the city, you can actually go ahead and make this improvement. And it's done. And it's been shown to work in communities throughout Florida. The other concept, it's relatively new in the US, it's pretty common in Europe and Latin America. It's this idea of a curbless shared street, a festival street, essentially a roadway that has no vertical curbing on it, doesn't have pavement markings, doesn't have a signage, essentially uses pavers or brick or some other type of something different than asphalt, and helps to create a level surface that makes it easy for people to walk, for people to bicycle, to drive, to have deliveries, to have transit service. And oftentimes, if they're designed correctly, oops, a little pre-hurricane visit or post-hurricane visit. Okay.
And the story was sounding good.
It's an intermission. All right, there we go.
There we go.
All right. See if it works. Look at that.
No, when they were painting, they lost from all the remote. I don't know where they are. There's no budget for the city to order an extra remote, chica. I requested. So I'm waiting. So what, in a while, business, I mean, we have to see.
Necessity is the mother of all invention, right? All right.
It's working, Eduardo. Yeah, but we are live streaming this just in case. Oh. Maybe this is why it's still on, I guess.
Yes. Can you hear me okay? Testing 1, 2, 3. All right, well, thank you very much for that little brief intermission, and we're back live. So one of the newer concepts is this idea of a curbless shared street. So beyond just a pedestrian benefit, what many communities have found, and this is largely starting more in the core urban area, such as your downtown here, where you've got a lot of streets that maybe have reached their functional life and they need to be repurposed. They got a lot of room, but they don't necessarily function well for people walking, and they provide more capacity than is what's needed for people driving. And a lot of communities are taking advantage when they look to these streets to address stormwater issues, to address flooding issues, to address aging infrastructure. And so many of these curbless shared streets, they're using that vertical space that you'd have normally reserved for your curb and your roadway to run stormwater facilities through, to run different types of low-impact development treatment for your trees, where the water actually funnels into cisterns or into your actual planting beds itself. St. Augustine's been doing this for several years now as they go in and redo several of their older streets. And more locally in West Palm Beach, Clematis Street and Rosemary had a lot of flooding issues, had a lot of aging infrastructure. Basically, it was the heart of their downtown, and they wanted to have events. So if you ever go to West Palm, most weekends, they have the street shut off. They have actually little retractable bollards built into the street itself, and when you want to have an event or a festival, just go in there, your police department or your public works pulls them up out of the ground. They unlock them, shuts them off to cars. When you're all done, you retract them, they go back down, and it really provides an open space, and it doesn't require you to go out and buy more land. It's basically, the street front or the building front to building front, reusing all of that space. And they've been shown to be incredibly beneficial, both in terms of revitalizing adjacent land uses, providing opportunities to slow down traffic, to introduce streetscape, and for also making stormwater improvements within your downtown areas. There are a few opportunities to make some connectivity improvements within the greater parts of the city. Some of them are in the residential portions of the city. Some of them are along your commercial corridors. So we're not necessarily saying that you're going to build these roadways, but we do believe they're feasible to look at as either redevelopment occurs or to actively pursue them. And several of the corridors actually happen to be along the US 1 corridor, either up in the Villa Laguna, Solomia area, or 123rd and Biscayne Boulevard by the Home Depot, by some of the other areas there. Several of the roadways we actually identified on the plan, they actually exist today. They're physically there, just at some point they were shut off. Either the reduced cut-through traffic, development wanted to shut them off, or for whatever other means that they were closed. So this plan is actually an opportunity to open up some of that network again, provide alternatives in conjunction with redevelopment along these corridors. And this is actually the streets plan itself, which includes the pedestrian priority streets for wider sidewalks, the curbless shared streets, largely focused in and around downtown initially, and then also some opportunities for connectivity evaluation within the city. The other component we looked at, and we didn't necessarily specify what type of improvement, because really it is case by case, but it's the idea of a multimodal corridor, and that's either a protected bicycle lane, a wider sidewalk, or a shared use pathway. And you've got a lot of opportunities. One thing you've been blessed with, and a lot of communities wish they had it, many of your local city streets, your residential streets, they have pretty wide rights of way. They have a lot of asphalt out there today, or they have swale systems there's a lot of opportunity to make some innovative improvements without actually having to go out and acquire a lot of land. And most of these projects are looking at to provide these facilities as alternatives to the state road system. Really, the only opportunity to retrofit your state road system would be to, as you see along certain portions of Biscayne Boulevard, they've put sort of the buffered bicycle lane. So some points you don't see it at all. You're going up towards Aventura, all of a sudden you go from a no bike lane to a 4-foot wide shoulder to one that's 6 foot wide with 2 lines on it. So in portions of Biscayne, there's actually opportunities to do that buffered bike lane along the whole corridor. Your prior plans had identified cycle tracks on Dixie, on 135th, on 123rd, 125th. Well, a lot of those have already been resurfaced, and when FDOT looked at them, there's no way you can put those facilities, you don't have the room for them on those corridors. So what we looked at is how can you provide them off of the state road system using your existing local roadway grid. Each one of these will have to be further designed as you go through the process, but you do have another number of opportunities to provide people connectivity and access throughout the city without necessarily having to rely on the major roadways. There are a few trail opportunities within existing Arch Creek preserve areas, within parks, the upgrading the existing trail that connects over to FIU. So there are a few opportunities for enhancements along the FEC Railroad and in some of your conservation areas to provide connectivity to the overall plan, but largely those are along the Biscayne US 1 corridor. This is the multimodal plan itself. It kind of shows these projects, and in the executive summary and in the technical report, it actually goes into detail every single one of these roadways and what type of improvement is proposed. One concept, the Miami-Dade County is already considering it. A number of communities have looked at it or are looking at it. Miami Beach had one. Unfortunately, it's recently dissolved, and I would say part of that is because it wasn't necessarily planned with development, and some of the locations were sort of off the beaten path, and then also didn't have a real generator. Well, the concept we have here is use of your existing canal system and start looking at this in conjunction with rail service coming to the community. Would it work today? Possibly. I don't know that you get a whole lot of ridership from it. Will it work in the future to connect over to Surfside, to Ball Harbor, to FIU? When you actually have rail service coming, yes, it will. Because otherwise, their option is being stuck in traffic to get to the rail line. So there's some real opportunities, and it does go beyond city limits because this would be something that would be a regional partnership and a regional opportunity to help fund and design. City of St. Augustine is exploring it as part of their mobility plan now, and Port St. Lucie is as well. And so this is a concept of using some infrastructure that's already there, and the county itself is already reviewing this concept. Again, the timeframes we identified is this would be something that would happen when rail service is actually going to come. If you did it now, likely it's going to fail. If you do it in the future with rail, it has a great opportunity for success. Mobility plan also looked at, you already have your existing NOMI circulator routes. There is some calls for reevaluating those routes when rail service comes along. We've also proposed a connection from the future rail station at 125th up to 151st and then into the Solomia Villa Laguna area as one of the routes to provide connectivity. The plan itself does include the purchase of additional vehicles, enhancement to existing routes. We've worked that into the fee calculations themselves, so this fee could also help to fund portions of the NOMI circulator system, vehicles, transit stops, and access to the future rail station. One of the biggest components of this overall plan is because you have a historic grid, you've got wide right-of-ways on your city streets, but you have an issue of flooding, and you have an issue of compacted swale systems that are no longer functioning. And you've got a lot of opportunities, and most of the roads already have sidewalks, so you have some base level of infrastructure on your city residential streets. Well, the concept of green streets is using parking one or two ways, either establishing a residential parking permit program and introducing on-street parking, or potentially metering on-street parking and using portions of that meter. I'm just going to keep going unless we need to stop for the live. All right. Just sucking all the energy out of North Miami here with this presentation, so. All right. AC contractor and helping. Yeah.
Jeff? Jonathan? Yes, please. You guys chatted so much and haven't met.
Hey, how you doing? Likewise.
He gives you a lot of credit for all the work you did. It was important stuff, man. Really important stuff.
Let me see if I explain.
All right. Doing this quite a while, so. Mike's hot. Somebody's phone there.
Yeah.
Great. All right. Well, we're back for the third intermission. So the concept of green streets is really one, goes back to doing this in the city of Bradenton, city of St. Augustine, and now in the city of Gainesville. And the concept is using what you already have. Using the asphalt that's already out there on the roadway, and how do you repurpose it? How do you stripe it to put on-street parking or on bicycle lanes? And how do you potentially visually narrow the travel lanes without necessarily adding additional asphalt? So the benefit of this is by providing and marking on-street parking, you can get the vehicles out of the swale system, and you can actually start to go back there and reintroduce vegetation, uncompact the soil so they actually function how they were originally supposed to function in terms of stormwater conveyance and also treatment. And part of this concept works in one or two ways. One is either if you have an innovative public works department, you can take a 24-foot wide stretch of asphalt and you can restripe it to either provide 8 foot for on-street parking or 2 foot or 4 foot on each side for bicycle lanes. If you want to be really creative and inventive, you actually look at a one-way pair in portions of your grid network, your residential street. That way you can actually put in a bike lane, a travel lane, and on-street parking. So you, one, help to slow down traffic, because you now have some friction between having people parking on street and driving. Two, you visually narrow the lane width. So now people, what's happening is, because they park on the swales and they don't park on your streets, most of your residential streets are 20-foot, wide, 24-foot wide drag strip. It's just straight shot. You can speed right down them, and there's really no impediments because people don't want their car out there because people are driving fast and they don't want it to get hit. So, there's a lot of things this helps solve. And then the third is by taking them off of the swale system, you help to actually introduce that. And so the way we've structured this is more as a pilot program. And the thought process is you find some residential streets, and you've got a lot of them, where you have some active residents that are either concerned about speeding, already going out there and planting the swale itself because they like the green space and they want to see it happen, or some neighbors that are willing to do something different. And you try these approaches, and because you're largely using pavement markings as opposed to physical barriers, it's a much cheaper option. So some of these improvements we're talking about are $2, $3 million a mile. Striping, depending on whether you have your own city ability to do it or you got to contract it out, can be done anywhere from $10,000 a mile to $50,000 a mile. You can cover a lot of city streets in a relatively short distance and period through use of pavement markings. And one thing we've actually done, we had the fire department come out with some of their best drivers and some of their rookie drivers in Bradenton. And we put cones on their residential streets. We started off first with 8-foot wide. So the fire truck ran over every single cone down the street. It's too narrow. Then we went to 9-foot. The experienced driver, knocked down one side of them. The rookie driver knocked them down both. Then we went to 10-foot. Experienced driver didn't knock down a single one. The rookie guy knocked down one row. 11-foot, 12-foot, upwards to 16-foot. And we did this exercise to show the fire department, if you have anywhere from roughly 12 feet to 14 feet, they wanted 16 to be a little bit of a buffer, you could easily navigate bringing a fire engine down your residential street. So you have 16 feet out of 24. You then free up 8 foot of asphalt. And then what we were able to convince them is, if you put a buffer next to your parking so people don't swing out the door right into traffic, you visually get down to 14 foot, but the reality is there's no physical impediment for the fire truck. They still have 16 foot to operate in, the 2 foots for the door. St. Augustine took a little bit different approach. They have old trees and homes built right up to the back of the right of way. They don't have a lot of land to do it. So they had 20-foot wide, 24-foot wide streets. So they just striped off a portion of their local road. If residents liked it, they'd go back in and put concrete over that and make a sidewalk. Lo and behold, they did it. Residents loved it. So now they had a 24-foot section of roadway, went down to 18 foot. They reclaimed part of the asphalt and put a sidewalk down. The benefit is you're not tearing up people's yards, you're not relocating utilities, you're using what's already there, but you're using it in a different way. And when I conclude this presentation, I'll show you one of the ways that we do that. But this helps in a low-cost, effective way, and something that can be done not 5 years from now, not 10 years from now, not something you need FDOT's help from. You don't need the state's, the county's permission to do it. They're your roads. It's your right-of-way. You can repurpose it. I will say you want to find initially some willing residents that would do it. You don't want to just go out there and do it on your own and do this, because then there's a lot of people that are going to complain. But you've got enough city streets where you can show that this is an opportunity. And this is a real quick way to get an infrastructure, build connectivity, improve stormwater. And if you want to make some revenues to help maintain it, then you meter the parking spaces, and then you establish a residential permit program. So if you live there, you can park there. If you don't live there and you're visiting, you got to pay to park there. And so this is the pilot area. It's in and around the future rail station, in and around downtown initially. It's not to say you couldn't do this anywhere out there, but I think your biggest opportunities for it to be a success are in and around the downtown core. That's what we're recommending. I think if you have one of these or you have another street elsewhere in the community to run this by, it's a great opportunity to do something innovative and creative. The other component that we've worked in is you have a separate initiative ongoing as a traffic calming program citywide. So we've integrated traffic calming into the mobility plan. So the mobility fee could be one of the funding sources for traffic calming improvements. The big difference between a traffic calming and a green street is a green street, we're looking at the whole length of the roadway doing something. Most traffic calming tends to be a spot treatment, either a chicane, which narrows the pavement width, a raised intersection, a mini roundabout. Your traffic calming plan identified a number of those throughout the city. I will say with traffic calming, it tends to be a little bit more expensive because you're physically changing the geometry of the roadway. You have to go out there and construct something, move something. With low-speed green streets, you're largely using pavement markings to help change your cross-section. And it's a more affordable way, and it's something that's not as permanent as some of the traffic calming, which sometimes tends to be beneficial to the community, other times tends to create some hostility because the residents don't necessarily want it. But we have included it. We have identified the areas of the city where it largely would be applicable to, which is the majority of the city, and the mobility fee can be used as a funding source for the traffic calming improvements. So with that, the executive summary that I prepared before was largely focused on the mobility plan and the projects and how they integrate with the city. The other document we produced is for the mobility fee itself, which is paid by new development. This is a very detailed report. It's over 200 pages in length. It's got a lot of calculations, lots of formulas, and it's done because we legally have to demonstrate that there's a connection between the impact of new development in the city and the need for improvements to serve that development and how much they should actually pay for it. And so within it, we looked at, in terms of the fee, we looked at the entirety of the city in terms of traffic on county roads, city roads, and state roads. And then we also looked at logical connections because traffic doesn't just stop at city limits. It goes throughout the city. And so we looked at the operations and the capacities on these roadways as part of our overall evaluation. And some of the improvements do extend outside of city limits because they make logical sense to connect other parts of the city. I don't know why this map didn't show up as well, but we'll have to fix this. Essentially, the assessment area is the city limits. This basically says if you're in the city and you're new development, then you would actually pay a fee to the city. If the city annexes some areas into the future, they would also pay the city when they redevelop. I do not know why those maps aren't. The benefit district essentially is outlined in the same areas and basically says where the money can be spent when it's collected. So the mobility fee calculation itself, one thing that we've done differently is the mobility fee is based on the square footage of a development. Doesn't matter if it's an apartment, it's a villa, it's a townhome, it's a single family home. If it's new or it's getting larger, they would pay a mobility fee for that increase or the new residential development. And what we found is this has been beneficial in a lot of communities. Typical approach is per dwelling unit. So a one-bedroom apartment pays the same as a three-bedroom apartment. An 800 square foot house pays the same as a 5,000 square foot house. When in reality, the traffic differences between those is significant. And so the fee itself, similar to office uses, commercial uses, it's per square foot. So if you build a smaller home, you pay less because you're smaller. If you build a larger home, you pay more. And so the rate itself is $2.46 per square foot. So if you're a 1,000 square foot house or an apartment dwelling unit, you pay $2,460. If you're smaller, you pay less. If you're larger, you pay more. You haven't experienced it a lot yet in this community, but you are starting to. And as other areas around you continue to rise in value, there'll be opportunities and developers looking to tear down existing homes in the city and building larger. Right now, under your current structures and under a lot of local government structures that charge per dwelling, tearing down a 1950s home that's 1,000 square foot and putting in a 4,000 square foot new home, it would be a wash. If all you charge is dwelling unit to dwelling unit, that new home doesn't pay anything more. Under this approach, they would pay for the additional 3,000 square feet because there's trip generation associated with larger homes. So they would pay the difference between the 1,000 square foot home they tore down and the 4,000 square foot home they're building. So as infill development comes, as redevelopment comes within the city, you're able to capture that, where in most fee structures, you wouldn't. And part of that is we've looked at the data both locally to North Miami and also nationally, and there's a correlation between the number of vehicles and the size of a home, the number of bedrooms and the size of a home. Just within North Miami itself, as the square footage of dwelling units gets larger, so do the number of bedrooms. As the number of bedrooms increases, so does the number of vehicles associated with it. Hence, as homes get larger, they tend to generate more traffic. The mobility fee also includes a number of other uses, such as places of worship, performance venues, assisted living facilities, and private education. Each one of those has its own traffic characteristics. Each one of those would pay a mobility fee per square foot. There are commercial recreation uses, a marina, a mini golf course, a tennis court, a fitness, a gym. If any of those facilities, recreational facilities, are provided by the county, the state, or the city, those are considered public. They would not pay. But if a private development builds a facility and they charge either a membership fee or admission to use it, then they would actually pay the mobility fee. And this is something that we are seeing in more and more communities is you have private multi-purpose recreational centers. They'll have pickleball, they'll have tennis courts, they'll have other types of features that you have to either be a member to or you have to actually pay to use. And they do generate quite a bit of traffic. There's also a rate for industrial uses and for mini warehouses. We've combined both mini warehouse and warehouse uses to recognize, warehouses probably don't have as big a impact as industrial use. Mini warehouses probably have a little bit more of an impact than what a straight trip generation normally would have. So essentially this recognizes two different types of industrial uses, both of which would pay a fee in the city. Again, just to reiterate, all these fees that are associated with projects, it's for new development only. It's not a tax on an existing land use. If you're new growth into the city, if you're redeveloping and you're going larger, then you would pay an additional fee to the city. There's also one for office uses. For retail, we have provided a lower rate for local retail uses. This would be a mom and pop sandwich shop, another type of local use in your community, a restaurant. We have not defined what local is. We found it's best for the local government to work with their economic development folks, the Chamber of Commerce, other interested parties that have far more knowledge of how local business operates in your community versus a statewide level. What we have done is we've pre-calculated the fees, so if you qualify somebody as a local business, they would be able to take advantage of the lower fee itself. We found, one or two things happens with local uses. They either go into existing spaces that are already retail, and if you're reusing a building that was previously used before for retail, you don't pay a mobility fee for that. You only pay for new uses. Or if they happen to be successful and they have the opportunity to build out their own space, having a lower fee does help them as part of the process. For your chain uses, your Walmarts, your Dollar Generals, those type of uses, they would pay the standard retail rate. For your high-impact generators, such as sit-down restaurants like a Chili's or Outback, or grocery stores or banks, they all tend to generate about 100 trips per thousand. They would fall under the high-impact retail because they do have a bigger impact to your system. And then the biggest impact are gas stations and fast food restaurants. So they would actually pay the highest fee of all. Yes, sir. Right now, it's probably structured because there's not a whole lot of trip generation information on it. They would fall under retail use. If you actually had the ability to go out and count some of them and do some further detail on it, you could probably say maybe it falls under high-impact retail, but right now it would fall under the retail use. Finally, we have something that we've been introducing for a number of years now, and a lot of communities are starting to embrace the idea. As more and more people look for convenience, drive, use their apps to get Uber or Lyft or DoorDash, some of the fast foods that we're seeing are getting smaller. Banks are potentially closing branches and they're having freestanding ATMs. While a restaurant may get smaller, it's adding additional drive-through lanes. So this mobility fee actually charges per drive-through lane. So a Chick-fil-A comes in and it has 2 lanes, they would pay for the building plus the 2 lanes. McDonald's comes in and it wants to add a lane, they would pay for that additional lane to it. A bank wants to put a freestanding ATM in the middle of a shopping center, they would pay for that. A lot of these features aren't captured in traditional fee schedules. We found that they actually are captured here. They do generate a lot of traffic and they do generate a higher mobility fee as well. This also applies to car washes, to vehicle fueling, gas stations, whether it's associated with a Costco, a Walmart, a Dollar General, or a freestanding convenience store. They pay per pump in addition to the building. And likewise, if you have vehicle repair or quick lube, something like that, they'd pay per bay. So that's actually all detailed in the technical report, and it's also illustrated in the executive summary. And those fees would be paid to help identify all the mobility projects in the action plan itself. So this is really one of the major first steps for the city. The next would be actual implementation of it. One thing we found, and this pairs up nicely with the curbless shared streets and the green streets, is the way most communities work, and the city still has policies in their comprehensive plan that establish a roadway level of service on state roads, county roads, and city roads. That roadway level of service is focused on vehicular capacity. Well, the reality is you're really not planning on widening any roadways. In fact, this plan doesn't have any widened roadways. It has connectivity in terms of new roads, but there's not a single widened roadway in this plan, and there aren't really any widened roadways planned anywhere surrounding the city. But the number one metric you use to evaluate both development and your comprehensive plan is to add road capacity, your level of service standard. 5 years ago, we introduced the concept in St. Augustine, which is kind of a unique one-off event community. The oldest city in America, compact. They certainly aren't widening any roadways, and we were in a meeting similar to this and similar to what I'll be in on Thursday in front of the Planning Commission. And one of the planning commissioners asked, why do you still have road level of service standards in your comp plan? We're not building a new road. We never intend to build another roadway. We're not interested in adding roadway capacity. So why is the only way you evaluate roadways and development based on road capacity? Great idea, great point. My planning response was the state requires it. The comprehensive plan and the Florida statute says you have to have a measurable standard in your comprehensive plan for roadways. We said, well, can't you measure something else? We said, we'll look at it. And what we came up with is using something that everybody understands, posted speed limit. You can be anywhere. If you see that sign that says 25 miles an hour, you know the maximum speed you go is 25 miles an hour. You don't need to be an engineer. You don't need to be a planner. You don't need to be anything special to know that. I shouldn't say special. You don't need to have a technical background to know what a speed limit is. And it's something most people can understand. So why not base it on speed limits? And the one other premise is all the roadways that you see, they're designed to move cars 5 to 10 miles an hour faster than what the posted speed limit is. So if you have a posted speed limit on your residential street and you routinely see people driving 30 miles an hour, 35 miles an hour, it's because that's how the streets are designed. They're designed for them to go that fast. US 1, 125th, 135th, when there's not congestion, they're designed to move you at 40, 45, 50 miles an hour. That's what they do. So we said this, the premise is simple. 1, get rid of road level service. 2, adopt a standard based on your posted speed limit. 3, design speed equals posted speed. So if you want to post a street at 25 miles an hour, you design it for people to drive 25 miles an hour. And people don't drive 25 miles an hour on 12-foot wide travel lanes. They just don't. That's the standard for the interstate system. They drive it when your lanes go down 10 foot, 9 foot, 8 foot. And what does that do? That frees up room to add in bike lanes, to add in on-street parking, to add in curbless shared streets. So you're no longer designing to how fast are cars going, which is roadway capacity. It's like, how fast do you want the cars to go? If you want them to go 15, design the road to 15. If you don't, you keep what you have today. This would be something that the city would actually have to adopt separately as part of its comprehensive plan. And didn't get a lot of traction because it was only St. Augustine, but we actually just got feedback last week in the city of Altamont Springs in Central Florida. Suburban community urbanizing, almost 50,000 residents in their community, very similar to the city of North Miami in terms of state roads, county roads, and your city road system. They've eliminated roadway level of service from their comprehensive plan. They've now adopted street quality of service with a policy that says the city council will establish standards based on posted speed limits. When you redesign a roadway, you design it to the speed of travel that you want people to move. Very simple premise. And you can actually measure it and quantify it over time. We did a whole inventory of the city, showed this many miles have 25 mile an hour, this many miles have 30, many miles have 40. You can actually quantify over time how you change your system by looking at the posted speed limit. So it's measurable, and it gets away from focusing on road capacity. And this is part of the impetus. You know, St. Augustine, you wouldn't think about it, but they had a really big issue with speeding. And the residents went out there and created their own signs because they wanted people to slow down. Well, you know, they didn't necessarily have the ability to do a lot of things. Once they adopted this plan and fee, they've now started going back in and narrowing a lot of these cross-sections to add in other features. And it's actually helped to slow down traffic in these communities. And the state's actually adopted policies or developed policies to go in this direction. The mobility plan itself integrates DOT's context classification. The next step would actually be to develop it or integrate it into the city's land development code itself. So the state's moving in this similar direction. They call it something a little bit different, but essentially it's doing the same thing. It's recognizing different streets have different functions, and speed of travel and road capacity aren't necessarily the only thing you should be looking at. There are a number of also implementation programs, residential parking programs, opportunities to look at scooters or electric bikes. So there are a number of add-on services, or not add-on service, but another add-on plan items that the city may want to consider as part of implementing the mobility plan itself. You know, we've identified a line on a map. We've identified a project in a table. That's what they are today. So really it would take the city taking that next step to design it and actually put these into action. So we had a public hearing last night at 6 o'clock. We have the public workshop today. This, I guess Thursday, tomorrow, in the evening, there's going to be a planning commission hearing to discuss the mobility plan and fee. City council is on the 22nd. They may have some changes that they direct staff to to make, and staff will work with me and we'll update those. We'll finalize the plan, the fee, the ordinance, and it's tentatively proposed for November 26th of this year. If it's adopted, it would go into effect roughly March 1st of next year. And so that would be a new fee, so any new development that comes into the city, they would pay the mobility fee. The mobility plan itself would actually be adopted on the 26th. That would go into effect right away, so that starts to help guide your planning and your engineering practices. Then the fee itself will go into effect next year. As new development comes in, they would pay that fee, and then you'd have some money, hopefully by the start of your fiscal year of '26, to actually start implementing some of these projects. And with that concludes my presentation, and thank you for sitting through some of the intermissions we had, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you all may have.
Go ahead. You need to come up to the mic for me, please. That one, if you like.
Good morning, Debbie and Jonathan. Jonathan, did I have your name correct? Jonathan? I'm Trulie Burton. I represent the Builders Association of South Florida. Your city is for sure on the up and coming. A number of our builder members are building in the city or have built in the city. Solamia is one of my members, Integra Investments, Related Group, and others as well. I guess I have several questions. Okay, we've got lights. There we go. First of all, thank you very much for walking the public and me, since I'm your member of the public, here live and in person, through this. I thought it was very interesting, and I learned quite a bit. I also live in Aventura, so it's an existing city, so I'm familiar with that. Several questions. You talked about, I've taken Brightline several times, the 2 rail stations coming. Was that Tri-Rail, or is that something else?
Those would be the Tri-Rail. I mean, I believe they're negotiating with Tri-Rail, but they're also potentially negotiating with Brightline itself to run its own service. That would be
Right.
something Miami-Dade County is leading, not the city of North Miami.
I understand. It seems like 5 years, it should have happened when I was like
know.
in high school. Okay, that's a long time ago. Okay, so that's a bit disappointing from the state side, but, and I understand the first mile and last mile, that's really, really important. Otherwise, you can't get there. But once, the mobility fee, I think, is very expensive, okay, first, in addition to which the city commission is going to be looking to also increase the cost of all other impact fees, including something called a general government fee, a lot. So has the issue, and I'm not sure if you're the right person, but somebody might be, maybe it's the city council, has the issue of how this is going to impact housing affordability been considered. It's going to be really expensive to live when you have impact fees imposed to the tune of $25,000 or $30,000 for apartments. Okay, this is a working class city, a solid, great city. I've lived in the northeast part of town for, most of my adult life. I love it up here. I wouldn't move anyplace else, but it's going to cost a lot more money. So I think housing affordability has been overlooked, first. Second, as to the mobility fee, while everyone says, yeah, new development is going to pay for it, well, after you build it, it must be maintained. And that means the city council must also be prepared for higher taxes to maintain it properly. I think that proper management is really important. When I've seen impact fees that have not been raised in 14 years, I'm thinking, how can this happen? Something is really not right here. Okay, so those are issues that I will take to the city commission and share with them. But I think that's one piece. Second, once a mobility fee is in place, and let's say Integra does the curbless streets and does the stormwater treatment, which I think is very clever, okay, and necessary, and helps with flooding, then after that, that's got to be maintained, and that's cost taxes, okay? And everyone hates the T word, but frankly, I don't. I know what my tax money pays for. It pays for I-95. All of our tax money pays for Biscayne Boulevard. It's important, and I think people need to be prepared for that, okay? Let me see what else I have. Also, your discussion about Altamont Springs and St. Augustine, while most respectfully I understand the great examples, Altamont Springs is a suburban location. I mean, it's between A and B. We are in the middle of the South Florida megalopolis. So I'm not sure that that seems to be quite the slow down stuff. I think within neighborhoods, I think that works. But, you know, I got here using maps, okay? And it took me down quieter streets. And I did not drive 40 miles an hour, I assure you, because the streets are smaller. So quite a bit of that works, and it does make sense. But again, I just want to make sure about that. So aside from the issue of housing affordability and that impact on new residents, okay, that's going to mean a lot to these folks. It really, really will be. And I think that, like I said, I'll raise that to the city council, but I think it's going to be an important piece. That and maintenance, because once, I don't care who it is, I don't care if it's King Kong developer, once they build it, someone's got to maintain it. And that's going to be a city responsibility, and they have to be ready to step up. Thanks.
Yeah.
If projects are 100% affordable housing, there's exemptions for waivers for that. So just keep that in mind. And I'm going to let Jonathan talk a little bit about the maintenance, but anytime a developer installs any sort of public infrastructure, as part of their agreement, they're required to maintain it. But as far as moving outward, I think, Jonathan, you want to tackle how the mobility fee can help that as well?
Thanks. Yeah, because affordable housing is subsidized. We understand that, and that goes without saying to me.
Yeah, and I just, to reiterate what Debbie said, there is a statutory provision that the city council can elect to waive fees for affordable housing. So that is one option that is out there. The mobility fee itself, in terms of maintenance, it's not really the purpose of it. It's to fund the infrastructure. What we have done in this plan, though, is we have integrated parking. And to the extent you either introduce a residential permit parking program, meter parking spaces, have a public parking facility, when you reduce some of these curbless shared streets, you introduce parking revenues. If it's done properly, the parking revenues can help to act. Now, it'd have to be earmarked to do that, and that's a policy decision. But the parking revenues could be used as a way to maintain some of this infrastructure you're building. So that's kind of separate from the fee. It is a decision because, you know, again, some people will equate a parking fee to a tax as well, but ultimately somebody does have to maintain it, and you are correct. And so the way we have done this, though, is if the city wanted to establish these parking programs, integrate parking, and charge people that maybe aren't residents or charge residents a certain share of it, that parking revenue then can at least be used to help fund some of this stuff. And we've also looked at some of the lower cost improvements, which is why I like the low-speed streets using the pavement markings, because it's a economical way, it's a cost-affordable way to make changes. And so you are correct. And then the Altamont example, the only real takeaway on that is the state has recognized local governments can do something different in terms of how they regulate their roads, how they design their roadways, and to use a different standard. The state of Florida, on any state road, they have the authority on their roadways. A local government cannot touch the speed limit on those. But you have a lot of city streets, and there's a lot of opportunities to do something creative if the city council so elects to do so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions? Fantastic. So thank you, Jonathan. We really appreciate all the work that you put into this. This is very innovative, which is what we've been looking for. Thank you, Jeff, again, for all the help that you have given us as far as all the great data and the reviews. And that's it for us for today. Thanks, guys.